I never imagined a single encounter could shift the course of my life. But that night, under the pale glow of a flickering streetlight, everything changed. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest and makes your heartbeat sound impossibly loud. Rain had left a lingering scent in the air, earthy and heavy, and I walked with no real destination, only the restless ache of a heart too tired to feel safe anywhere. Life had been relentless lately. Stress, loneliness, the gnawing sense that something essential was missing. But I hadn't expected the universe to hand me an answer in the form of a stranger. Or perhaps, a guardian. Beneath the gnarled branches of the old oak in the park, I first saw him. A sleek silhouette, poised and still, as though the shadows themselves had sculpted him there. At first, I thought he was just another stray, lost like so many wandering souls in the city. But as I drew closer, every instinct in me screamed that he was different. Shadow, I would later call him, though I didn't know it yet. His coat shimmered under the dim light, muscles rippling with effortless strength. And then, there were his eyes, dark, deep, almost unreadable, holding something I couldn't quite name. Intelligence, curiosity, a quiet gravity that pulled at me without asking. I stopped several feet away, uncertain. I had always been wary of Dobermans. Stories of aggression and unpredictability danced at the edge of my mind. But this one didn't move, didn't bark, didn't growl. He simply watched, like he was reading not just my body, but my thoughts, my fears, my exhaustion. The city around us seemed to fade. Even the hum of distant traffic became irrelevant. Between us stretched a silence that was almost tangible, a fragile thread of unspoken understanding. Something in me urged caution. Something deeper whispered curiosity. I lifted my hand slowly, palm outward, a universal gesture of trust. Shadow tilted his head, eyes never leaving mine, then pressed his cold nose lightly against my skin. A shiver traveled down my spine. His tail gave the smallest wag, almost imperceptible, but it spoke louder than words. I exhaled shakily, brushing my fingers over his head. He leaned in, just slightly, and in that subtle motion, a quiet acknowledgement passed between us. No collar, no leash, no owner in sight. Alone, like me. I knelt, lowering myself to his level. "Hey, buddy," I whispered. "Where did you come from?" He didn't answer, of course, but it didn't matter. Somehow, in a way I couldn't explain, I already knew that this wasn't random. Fate had orchestrated this meeting with meticulous precision. My heart thudded, a mixture of awe and anticipation, as I felt the first flicker of connection, raw and unspoken. That night, sleep eluded me. Every shadow in my room reminded me of him. His gaze, the way his nose had pressed to my hand, lingered in my mind. Who was he? Where did he come from? And why did it feel like I had known him forever? By the next evening, I found myself walking the same path, my pulse quickening as I approached the oak. There he was, same posture, same quiet authority. And then his tail wagged, slow, deliberate, then faster, as if he remembered me, as if he had been waiting. "Hey, buddy," I murmured, crouching. Shadow stepped closer, pressing his head against my knee. Something inside me cracked open an ache I hadn't realized was there. Life had felt empty for so long, a monotonous cycle of obligations and solitude. But here, in the presence of this silent, powerful creature, I felt a warmth I hadn't known I'd been missing. We sat together, the hours dissolving in quiet communion. No words were needed. His gentle nudges, the way he allowed me to scratch behind his ears, spoke volumes. For the first time in years, I felt seen. And as I finally stood to leave, reluctant, I knew that this was just the beginning. Something had shifted, irrevocably. Shadow wasn't just a dog. He was a presence, a guardian, a companion, and perhaps even a mirror to the part of me I'd thought was lost forever. But that night, as I walked home under the heavy blanket of darkness, unease crept in alongside anticipation. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the pavement, and somewhere in the corner of my vision, movement stirred. A figure, half hidden under the flickering light, watching, and Shadow stiffened. Shadow's posture shifted instantly, every muscle coiled like a spring. His ears pinned slightly, tail low but tense, eyes locked on the shadowy figure across the street. My heartbeat spiked, a mix of fear and adrenaline surging through me. "Shadow! What is it?" I whispered. though I already knew he wasn't just reacting to movement. He sensed something I couldn't yet see. The figure didn't move, only watched. His hoodie pulled low, hands buried in pockets, posture casual but deliberate. The street light above flickered, painting the man in erratic strokes of light and shadow. Every instinct screamed danger. I wanted to run, but my legs felt rooted, caught between panic and fascination. Shadow stepped closer, nudging me gently, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. A low growl rumbled from deep within him, vibrating through the air and into my chest. It wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration. Protector. Guardian. I swallowed hard, my fingers gripping his fur. "Go on, Shadow. You've got this," I muttered, unsure if I meant the words for him or for myself. The man shifted slightly, taking a step forward, and Shadow's growl sharpened into a bark, controlled, precise, and cutting through the silence like a knife. The man flinched, his step faltered, and then, without a word, he disappeared into the shadows from which he had emerged. Relief washed over me in hot, overwhelming waves, my knees weakening as I sank to the pavement. Shadow sat beside me, ears still alert, body tense, but watching me with those familiar, knowing eyes. I exhaled shakily, brushing my fingers along his neck. Thank you for that," I whispered. His tail gave a small wag, a gentle grounding gesture that seemed to say, "Always." The walk home was quiet but different now. Shadow stayed close, every step deliberate, as if marking his territory and mine at the same time. The night air felt heavier, carrying a strange mixture of safety and lingering tension. My thoughts swirled. Who was that man? What had he wanted? And why did Shadow know, without hesitation, exactly how to respond? The answers eluded me, but in that absence of understanding, a new layer of trust formed between us. Once inside, I let Shadow roam freely. He paused at the door, then chose a spot near the living room, his body curling into a relaxed yet protective posture. I watched him, realizing that he wasn't just a companion. He was a sentinel, a constant presence shaping the rhythm of my life. Sitting beside him, I traced patterns through his sleek fur, feeling a sense of calm I hadn't known in years. "You belong here, Shadow," I murmured. "And I think I belong with you too." Days slipped into weeks, and our bond deepened with quiet consistency. Every evening, I would find him waiting beneath the oak tree. Every morning he greeted me with unwavering enthusiasm. We settled into a rhythm: walks, shared silences, soft words spoken only to be carried away by the wind. There were no demands, no judgments, only presence. I began talking about things I had never voiced aloud: hopes, fears, regrets, and Shadow listened, always listened. In his quiet understanding, I found an echo of my own emotions, reflected back with warmth and empathy. Life began to shift in subtle ways. The emptiness that had shadowed my days started to fade. Laughter returned in brief, unexpected bursts. Moments that once seemed inconsequential now held weight. The way Shadow rested his head on my lap as I worked, the tilt of his ears when he heard my voice, the brush of his fur against my hands. I realized that home wasn't just a roof over my head or walls around me. It was this presence, this connection, this living, breathing assurance that I wasn't truly alone. One evening, as the wind threaded its way through the branches above the park, I asked him softly, "Do you have a home, Shadow?" He didn't answer, not with words, but his eyes, dark and steady, seemed to reply with everything he felt. I sighed, realizing we shared the same truth. Shelter didn't equal belonging. We had both wandered through life seeking something deeper, a connection that transcended the mundane. And in that park, beneath the ancient oak, we had found it. Yet, despite the warmth and reassurance, a subtle tension lingered. I couldn't shake the memory of the man in the shadows, the instinctual warning in Shadow's eyes, the way his growl had cut through, the night like steel. Danger, though distant for now, had etched itself into our story. I shivered, drawing Shadow closer. He leaned into me, a tangible presence that anchored my racing heart, and I knew whatever came next, we would face it together. But that night, as I finally drifted into sleep, the feeling of unease didn't fully leave. Somewhere, hidden beyond the streetlights and trees, a part of the world remained unpredictable, and Shadow, vigilant even in dreams, stirred at the edge of consciousness, as if aware of something I could not yet see. The days that followed carried a rhythm both comforting and fragile. Shadow and I moved through them together, our steps in sync, our silences speaking volumes. Every morning, his warm brown eyes would meet mine before I even opened them, tail giving a gentle wag as if to say, "Another day, together." And every evening, he walked beside me, pacing carefully, alert but calm. Life, for the first time in years, felt steady, anchored by the quiet certainty of his presence. But the world, I soon realized, has a way of reminding you that peace is always temporary. One night, as we strolled through our familiar park, a sharp rustle behind the bushes made Shadow freeze. His ears pricked, his stance rigid, muscles coiled like springs. My pulse quickened, a cold sweat prickling at my neck. "Shadow, what is it?" I whispered, heart hammering. He didn't move toward me. Instead, he shifted slightly, positioning himself between me and whatever lurked in the dark. The air seemed to thicken, silence deepening, as if the night itself held its breath. From the shadows, a figure emerged taller than any man I had seen in the park before, hooded, hands tucked deep into pockets. Shadow growled low, a sound that vibrated through the empty space between us. I could feel his tension, his readiness to act, a primal protectiveness that made every instinct in my body resonate with his. The man's gaze lingered on me, unreadable, yet calculated. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. But Shadow, he didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, chest high, teeth bared in a controlled display of force. It was over in seconds. The man flinched, took a cautious step back, and then, without a word, retreated into the shadows from which he had emerged. My knees went weak as adrenaline surged and then dissipated, leaving me trembling. Shadow sat by my side, tail low but eyes unwavering, watching me with that quiet, unwavering understanding. Relief and awe mingled in my chest. I knelt beside him, running my fingers through his sleek fur. "You've saved me again," I whispered. His head leaned slightly into my touch, and I realized, not for the first time, that I owed him far more than words could express. In the weeks that followed, our bond deepened beyond the ordinary. Shadow became my anchor, my constant. Together, we walked through the quiet streets, shared in the stillness of nights, and discovered a rhythm of companionship that filled a void I hadn't known how empty it was. I began speaking aloud, recounting my fears, my regrets, the silent thoughts that had haunted me. He listened not with judgment but with presence, with an understanding that transcended words. His warmth became a salve for my restless spirit, and slowly, life began to feel richer, more meaningful. We shared small rituals, morning walks under the soft glow of dawn, quiet evenings in the living room, hands threading through his fur as he rested his head on my lap. Shadow didn't just inhabit my space, he transformed it. The apartment, once just walls and furniture, now held the pulse of life, of trust, of unwavering loyalty. Home had been redefined not by objects, but by presence, by connection. And for the first time in years, I felt secure in the idea that I wasn't navigating life alone. Yet, the sense of fragility never fully left me. I noticed subtle changes in Shadow over time, the way he occasionally lingered by the door longer than usual, his breathing heavier after long walks, the slight stiffness in his movements. I tried to push the worry aside, convincing myself he was merely growing older, more aware of the world's unpredictability. But deep down, I knew that every moment with him was precious, every wag of his tail a gift that could not be taken for granted. One quiet evening, as the wind carried the scent of rain through the trees, I asked softly, "Shadow, do you remember the first night we met?" He looked up at me, eyes deep and knowing, and nuzzled my hand. No words were needed. Memory, trust, and understanding passed between us effortlessly. It was in that moment I understood. This bond, unexpected, intense, and unbreakable, was not merely companionship. It was survival, healing, and love, all entwined. But life has a way of balancing joy with unease. That night, as I lay on the couch with Shadow curled at my feet, a lingering shadow of unease remained. The world beyond our sanctuary was unpredictable. The man in the park, the silent dangers that lurked in corners unseen, they reminded me that safety was never guaranteed. Shadow, alert even in sleep, twitched slightly, ears flicking toward an imagined threat. And I realized that this life, beautiful as it was, demanded vigilance, courage, and trust in a bond that had proven stronger than fear itself. As I drifted into uneasy sleep, I felt the press of Shadow's body against my leg, the steady rhythm of his breathing a lullaby for my frayed nerves. And somewhere deep inside, I knew that whatever challenges awaited us, we would face them together. Shadow wasn't just a dog. He was my protector, my confidant, my family, and together, we had begun a story that neither time nor circumstance could undo. But the night had more to reveal. A sudden noise outside the scrape of shoes on pavement made Shadow stir, ears alert, body tense. He rose slowly, gaze fixed on the window, muscles rippling beneath his coat. And I understood, in that instant, that our journey was far from over. Because fate, I realized, was never content to simply watch from the sidelines. The following weeks brought a sense of normalcy, yet the shadow of that night lingered like an uninvited guest. Shadow remained vigilant, ever watchful, his instincts finely tuned to the rhythms of the city and to my own emotional tides. Every step we took together through the park, every glance toward the streets, reminded me that the world could shift in an instant, and that his loyalty was both my protection and my anchor. Life, however, continued its gentle flow despite the underlying tension. Shadow became more than a companion. He was a presence that filled the silent spaces in my apartment, a warm weight against loneliness. Mornings began with his eager nudges, his soft whines as he waited for our walks. I found myself talking aloud, sharing thoughts that had long been buried. Shadow never judged. He only listened, offering the occasional nuzzle or tilt of his head that seemed to say, "I understand." It was a communion of souls, wordless yet complete. Yet, subtle signs began to unsettle me. Shadow moved with a slight stiffness, as though each step required more effort than before. He slept longer, his vibrant energy tempered by the inexorable passage of time. I noticed the way he lingered near the door, ears pricked even in the safety of home. Each observation pressed against my chest with a quiet urgency. I had always known that our time together would be finite, but knowing didn't soften the reality. One late evening, as rain streaked against the windows and the city seemed to vanish in the mist, I knelt beside him. His eyes met mine, deep brown pools reflecting both trust and a quiet understanding of the bond we shared. "You don't have to fight for me anymore, Shadow," I whispered, running my hand along his neck. He exhaled softly, pressing his head against my chest. And in that small, unspoken gesture, he conveyed something profound. He wasn't afraid to leave because of fear. He was staying for love, for connection, for the life we had built together. Days passed in a delicate rhythm of joy and quiet sorrow. Shadow remained my sentinel, my companion, my reason to rise each morning. The world outside continued to churn unpredictably, but within the walls of my apartment, there was sanctuary. We shared walks under the gray light of dawn, evenings on the worn couch where he rested his head in my lap, and moments of stillness where the only sound was the harmony of our breathing. It was simple, but in its simplicity lay a depth I had never known possible. Then came the subtle decline that I had dreaded. Shadow's powerful frame, once a seamless blend of strength and grace, began to show the first hints of frailty. His movements slowed, his once confident strides tempered by caution. Still, his spirit remained indomitable. Every morning, he rose to greet me. Every night, he curled beside me, as if to remind me that his loyalty was unwavering, even in weakness. And I realized that love, in its truest form, does not demand perfection, it only asks for presence. One night, as I sat on the floor beside him, tracing the familiar contours of his fur, a heaviness pressed against my chest. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered into the quiet room. "You've given me everything, Shadow. You don't have to carry the weight anymore." He lifted his head, eyes locking with mine, and for the first time, he placed his paw gently on my knee. It was a silent promise, a bond that needed no words. I felt it seep into my very soul, the unspoken truth that our connection would endure, even as time forced us to face inevitable change. The following morning, I woke to silence. The familiar warmth at my side, the steady breathing that had been a comfort for countless nights, was gone. Panic flared, only to be replaced by the stillness of absence. I knelt on the floor, pressing my face to the empty space where he had lain, my chest aching with a grief that was both raw and complete. Shadow had departed, but the echo of his presence lingered, woven into every shadow of the apartment, every quiet corner of my heart. People say dogs enter our lives to teach lessons, loyalty, love, the depth of companionship. Shadow had taught me all of that and more, and though he was gone, I felt him beside me in quiet moments. imagined the soft press of his paws on the floor, and carried the warmth of our bond in every step I took. I had lost a friend, a guardian, a soul that mirrored mine, but I had gained a lesson in love that would endure. Yet even in the quiet, there remained a memory of suspense, a reminder that life is never entirely predictable. Somewhere in the city, dangers still lurked, shadows still shifted, and I knew that in another time, in another place, Shadow's instincts, loyalty, and courage would be needed again. But for now, all that remained was the echo of pause, the memory of warmth, and the profound certainty that some bonds never truly fade. The days after Shadow's passing were surreal. The apartment felt hollow, every corner echoing the absence of his presence. I could still feel the weight of him lying against my leg, still hear the imagined shuffle of his paws on the floor. Grief wrapped around me, heavy and relentless. But somewhere beneath it all, a quiet warmth persisted, the memory of our bond, unbroken and eternal. I walked the park alone at first, retracing the paths where we had spent countless hours. The oak tree, now bathed in the soft glow of twilight, seemed emptier without him waiting beneath its branches. Yet as I stood there, I realized that Shadow hadn't truly left. His lessons, his love, and his unwavering loyalty had become a part of me. The silence around me no longer felt entirely lonely. It was infused with his memory, with the echoes of shared walks, whispered conversations, and the steady heartbeat of companionship. I remembered the first night we met, the flickering streetlight, and the way he had pressed his nose against my hand, breaking down walls I hadn't known existed. I remembered the stranger in the park, and how Shadow had stood unwavering, a protector whose courage defied explanation. I remembered the quiet evenings where he simply listened, offering no judgment, only presence. These memories became a sanctuary, a place I could retreat to when the world felt overwhelming. Time moved forward, as it always does, but Shadow's impact lingered. I began to notice the small ways his influence shaped my life. Patience in moments of frustration, the courage to face fears, the gentle understanding that connection is built not on words but on shared trust. I carried these lessons into every corner of my life, into every conversation, into every quiet moment of reflection. Shadow's presence had been transformative, and even, in absence, it continued to guide me. Friends noticed the change in me. I smiled more easily, laughed more freely, and approached life with a subtle confidence that had been absent before. They didn't know the source, the Doberman who had entered my life unexpectedly, but I didn't need to explain. Shadow's gifts weren't measured in stories or photos. They lived in the way I navigated the world, the way I connected with others, and the depth of empathy I felt for those around me. There were nights when I swore I could hear him, the soft patter of paws across the floor, the familiar shift as he curled beside me. I would close my eyes and feel the warmth of his body, the strength in his gaze, and the quiet reassurance that everything would be all right. In those moments, grief softened into gratitude. I had been blessed with a connection so rare, so profound, that it could never truly fade. I realized then that Shadow's gift wasn't just companionship, it was a revelation of what it meant to be truly alive, to love without expectation, to protect without question, to trust and be trusted. Every bark, every nuzzle, every steadfast look had been a thread weaving a tapestry of resilience and devotion. And in the end, it wasn't just about the life he had lived, it was about the life he had helped me reclaim. As weeks turned into months, I found ways to honor him. I visited the park where we had met, leaving small offerings, a gesture of thanks for the presence that had changed everything. I spoke to him quietly in the mornings and evenings, recounting my days, sharing my thoughts. Shadow may have been gone, but he remained with me in every heartbeat, every memory, every step forward. Some bonds, I came to understand, are impervious to time. They transcend physical presence, lingering in the spaces between moments, in the quiet corners of memory, in the way one moves through life after experiencing profound connection. Shadow had been more than a dog. He had been a guardian, a friend, a teacher, and a mirror of the best parts of myself. And though I could no longer see him, I carried him in everything I did. On quiet nights, when the city slept and the world seemed still, I would close my eyes and imagine him lying beside me, tail flicking gently, eyes warm and knowing. And I smiled, because I knew that some love is eternal, some loyalty unwavering, and some bonds, no matter how brief in time, never truly fade. Shadow had changed my life in ways I could never fully express, teaching me courage, trust, and the quiet power of connection. And as I moved forward, I vowed to honor him not just in memory, but in the way I lived, the way I loved, and the way I opened my heart to the unexpected gifts life could offer. Some encounters are fleeting, some are life-defining. Shadow's presence had been the latter. And in that knowledge, I found peace, gratitude, and a profound sense of being alive once more.